Hey there everybody, and welcome to beautiful Mackinac Island. It is the 1st of July, summertime on Mackinac Island, and by popular demand we are back at my grandmother's house. We're going to show you guys through how gorgeous this garden looks in the beginning of July like this, show you an area that we redesigned and redid with your help from last season, and check out everything that's blooming and looking gorgeous at Grandma's. So let's dive in. All right, everybody, so we are gonna go into my grandmother's house. This is one of the most iconic locations on the island. It's been in my family, well, since it was built in 1981. And it starts with this absolutely gorgeous climbing hydrangea entryway. There's 2 gorgeous moonbeam climbing hydrangeas planted on either side of this, and they have completely taken over and just eaten this entry arbor. This bench is, really stunning, but the roof is completely rotten out and the hydrangea has become the roof. The shingles will never be replaced because it would require us to, trim the hydrangea back really hard, and there's no interest in doing that. So she's in her full bloom and glory and everything right now, looking absolutely gorgeous, but also looking gorgeous in the gardens right now is all the summer color. Like I said, it's early July, so the annuals and all the pots and stuff are just starting to fill out, fluff out a little bit and fill in. We just planted these all a few weeks ago because up here on Mackinac Island, we can't really plant anything until very end of May, early June. So this one has only been in for a few weeks, but as you can see, a lot of this stuff is starting to fill in nicely. And we always, of course, have to come through, do some deadheading and everything like that. Oh, and this is a good opportunity here. While we're here, I'll show you guys how to properly deadhead geraniums. Too often, I see people reach for their clippers and deadhead a geranium like that. That is no bueno. Do not do that because this stick will keep growing. So in fact, what you have to do to deadhead a geranium is take your fingers, follow it right down the stem and snap off that little node there. And once you snap off that little node, it will stop growing from that stick and then send energy into other blooms. And so this guy is spent. We'll deadhead these out and all of these other blooms will start coming on and blooming out. So always, a little bit of maintenance and cleaning to do, getting all the brown and stuff out helps to let the plants breathe, get some air in there, and just the action of like working in a planter like this and digging around, picking the brown leaves out, gets some air, gets the plants moving, and I think they do better just with a little bit of interaction and touch and talking to them and stuff like that a little bit. That's just my opinion, but I'm pretty sure it's true. Anyway, moving on through the garden here, there's a lot of really unique specimen plants in this garden, and this is one of them. This is a Palabin lilac, massive gumdrop that has just finished blooming. You can see all the blooms are spent and it's starting to send out some new growth here. So now is the time we're gonna trim this thing back as hard as we can, and it will actually bloom again a little bit in late summer, but we want to trim this thing back as hard as we can now. And this one is actually grafted. So you can see way back in there, that stem that the lilac is grafted to. It's a black cherry stem grafted because it's a big shrub Palabin lilac. So right over here, this is also a Palabin lilac, and this is what they look like, in their natural or normal form, real dense shrub. And that big massive beauty is grafted up to give it some height and elevation, and then have a garden and everything underneath it. But it is huge. It's been there a long time. One of the originals from the original garden in the early 80s. So the real specimens of this garden, the hydrangeas over the arbor, that Palabin lilac there. This Camperdown elm, or weeping elm, is also one of the originals. And this beauty has some really, really cool structure and form to it as well, up underneath here. Oftentimes when I get up in here, there's some birds that have nested in here, and they come and attack me and get all angry. So I'm really surprised that there aren't any birds in here right now, because it's such a perfect little habitat for birds' nests. And if there are, they're hiding really well, but I don't think there are right now. But there's a little bit of dead in here, and we've left some of these because they just help to kind of stake and hold this massive umbrella canopy up. But some of this dead needs to be trimmed out and cleaned up a little bit. And this thing, again, even in the full sun here, creates this really deep, shady little oasis underneath here for some plants like this Brunera right here is thriving here in the shade. Hostas and Astilbe. You can see this Astilbe is just getting going here. Beautiful white little Astilbe right there. And a lot of the garden, you know, even though it's a very, very small little space, there's a lot of diversity. We've got some colorful annuals, some really kind of old school classic roses and perennials and stuff here. The alliums and roses is a cool combo there. And in the deep shade as well, provided by some of these huge old original trees. Another neat feature of the garden here is this pair of Espaliered pruned crabapples. These have also just finished their bloom this spring, so now they're ready for a hard pruning back to get them in shape. In order to prune these guys, we go through, and really they get trimmed back pretty hard initially. We just kind of trim and cut this stuff all back, all this new growth back. And then we're looking for any branches that are heading like cross branches. So we identify all the original big thick stems that are inside there. And then once this thing is pruned back into a flatter shape, then we come in and we're looking for branches that are coming back the other way and prune those off. Like this guy right here, you know, needs to come off. This guy right here, making sure that the shape stays really flat and has that kind of open form to it. We don't want a lot of crisscrossing branching that's going to come back this way and hide that really beautiful shape of the stem structure for that espalier. And the top gets trimmed down really tight. It's a very tight wall that has to be produced here with this type of pruning. So you can see all the new growth after it has bloomed, all the new growth that it's sending off. We'll trim all that back really tight so that it can produce a nice little flush of some healthy new growth closer to the stems, which will have all kinds of bud count on it so that it can bud out, produce new healthy growth this summer, and then in the spring it'll be just a wall of beautiful color. So this pair here, it's really cool because they hold the corner of the house right here in that crabapple bright pink. This is a light pink crab, really beautiful, and a fun one to espalier. This one you can see a little better, that flat form to it in this big huge bed of pachysandra here. But again, you know, we're looking at these branches like this guy that are going back across and creating too much thickness there, and we'll trim this back pretty hard to get all these wild hairs that are coming out at me and reaching for the light. We're going to trim those right back, you know, really hard. Initially, chop it back and then come back in and tighten up and make sure that it's got a really nice tight form to it. So these espaliers were originally built on this cypress frame, so they're held out about a foot away from the building so that the house itself can still breathe and get plenty of air. And this is all original siding, so it's about 40 years old, has never had any oil or stain or anything like that on it. It's just cedar siding in the, you know, complete exposure to the elements and everything here, and it's totally fine because it's got air, room to breathe and everything like that, and is doing great even with these espalieres right up against the house. So we took this idea and this same design with this cypress trellis system and integrated that into a new design in a new area on the other side of the house that I asked all of you to help me design last season. So in a few minutes we'll get there and I'll show you guys through that whole little area here in just a minute. Back here, the real glory shot and the win is the back side of the house. Absolutely beautiful, right here on the water, on the Straits of Mackinac. Very special spot. And you can see it's a very calm, beautiful summer day right now, but when it's storming and the waves are really rolling in here, the water crashes against these rocks and the water is splashing up all over the house and the yard and everything. But even with that kind of exposure, the house is still in great shape. It's because it, you know, has good airflow, it can dry out, and most importantly, it's never been stained or any paint or anything like that put on it. So it does, you know, if it ever had been painted, it would be peeling like crazy. It would need to be painted every single year. So my grandfather, you know, one of the things he was just most adamant about was that we do not put any stain, anything like that on it. Let the cedar be, and the natural kind of protection of the cedar itself as it grays and weathers creates the, you know, the protection from the elements. In these back beds here, mostly just some cut flowers for my grandmother to bring inside and make some bouquets. So we have some just daisies and roses. The peonies are kind of on their way out. So these guys are really on their way out now. Look at that mass of the peony bloom. I wish I could take this scent and send it in through the camera right now. But oh my gosh, I almost upset that bumblebee. Look at, he's like in bumblebee heaven right there. It's like, leave me alone. Oh, look at him, he's like drunk on peony. But this big, you know, mass of peonies here, there's a few in here that are still worthy of being cut and brought inside for sure. But as these now are spent, we got some really heavy rains that just, you know, depleted the peonies. We'll cut these back. And the thing I love about herbaceous peonies is that the leaves and the foliage look great all season long. So even when we cut back all these blooms, we can clean up the plant, pull the stakes out, and we'll have a nice leafy green plant there that'll hold really nicely. And then the daisies and the roses, you know, can still do their thing and look great in this little bed. But the peonies, you know, they don't die back and leave a big hole in the garden. That's some nice annual color here in these pots and boxes. One of my favorites is this Super Bina right here. This is called Sparkling Amethyst. This is a Proven Winners plant. One of our absolute favorites on Mackinac Island. We use a ton of this plant. As you can see, it just blooms like crazy. And even in a little bit of shade, we get a lot of bloom out of that plant. But here in the full sun, it's really in its glory and does not need any deadheading or anything like that, and just keeps blooming and blooming and blooming. Really gorgeous plant. In the center of all these planters back here, we've got meteor showers. This is a really cool sterile Verbena bonariensis. So it doesn't go to seed and spread like crazy and become kind of a nuisance. And it's a smaller, more dense Verbena bonariensis. So it's a great plant in containers or in gardens, but it's a butterfly magnet. So by featuring these in all of these planters across the back deck in the summertime, once the monarchs get back to Mackinac Island here, this will be just monarch butterflies floating on all these like crazy, which is really pretty to see. Now, as we're looking out here toward the water, we're looking at Round Island Lighthouse there, an iconic, beautiful, old historic lighthouse that has been restored, and it is on the point of Round Island. Round Island is a nationally protected wilderness area. There's not a single house or building or structure or anything on that entire island, and it's a really beautiful, beautiful island to go explore and hike through. There aren't, you know, trails or anything like that, but because the forest is really old, there's some big, big trees. It's an open canopy. You can get there by private boat or by kayak or anything like that. There's no ferries or anything like that that take you there, but it's a really fun place to explore and hike around and stuff like that. And looking out to the west, we're looking at the Mackinac Bridge. The Mackinac Bridge is the 5th largest, longest suspension bridge in the world. At the time that it was built, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world. And what's most fascinating to me, I always find, is that 75% of the mass of the Mackinac Bridge is underwater. So as gigantic and huge as it is, 5 miles long, 75% of it is underwater. And when that was built in the 40s and 50s, the engineering that went into being able to do something like that is unbelievable. Really fascinating. There's a movie, perhaps we'll put the link or something to it if we can find it, but there's a movie on the History Channel about the making of the Mackinac Bridge that's really, really fascinating. Okay, and this really cool little pocket of Grandma's garden is my favorite, and this is where we did a lot of changes and things like that last year, and we asked you guys to help design this little area. And believe it or not, a lot of the suggestions and a lot of the feedback that I got from you guys helped to inspire and come up with what we ended up doing under this little space and place here. First and foremost, this huge columnar beech got a major, major haircut. So I climbed up in this guy and got way up in here and trimmed all of the limbs and everything off up to, you know, about a 12-foot height or so to get a lot more air and light up in here and to really show off how cool this whole space really is. And it really helped. We had a lot of growth and everything down here, and it really lightened up, got a lot more air on the house and a lot more light into this garden, which helped a tremendous amount. Then this was the space that was really kind of empty. There were some old rhododendrons in here that had to go. They were, you know, spent and tired and not blooming. So we redid this whole area, and I'll show you guys through what we ended up doing. So back in here, I had my brother, who many of you know is an awesome woodworker and builder. My brother Emery built this cypress trellis frame to match those that we talked about earlier on the other side of the house. And this trellis frame here was built so that I could plant this awesome clematis. I dug this up from my own house. This is a really, really Jacomandiae dark purple clematis that I dug up and planted here. You can see it's healthy and happy and just getting going. You know, it'll take a year or two to really get its wits about it to get going here, but it'll take over this whole entire trellis and be reaching for the light and everything that we have now provided for it, and be a really cool, beautiful feature back here. But for sure, the stunner of this little space is this cool little Japanese maple. I wanted to bring some of this burgundy color into here. I didn't have any of this burgundy in the landscape or garden or anything really yet. And I love Japanese maples. My grandmother absolutely loves them as well. And this is just the perfect little specimen in this corner here. And then in front of it, we put, to really make that burgundy pop, we put some of this Sun King Aralia, which is a great pairing. This Aralia is an awesome, tough plant, and it'll get fairly good size, but it's very easy to keep cut back and in check. So I got a couple of those Aralias there, some beautiful little ferns. These are a dainty little lady in red fern, and then some dwarf astilbe. A few little astilbes there that'll fill in and thicken up, so we'll have a nice bank of foliage and color there. Then we've got some brunera, another favorite of mine. It is now out of flower, but you can see the flowers with these pretty little blue things. They're super cute, like a forget-me-not flower. And when they get like this, they're spent, their flowers are done. You can deadhead these by just trimming back those stems where the flowers were. By trimming those back a little bit before they turn brown or anything, allows the plant to have some really pretty form to it, as you can see. And this foliage color will hold all summer long and be real silvery and pretty. So those will get pretty good size and fill this little spot here. And then in front of that, a nice river of ajuga. This ajuga is real pretty. We got to keep it, you know, weeded a little bit, keep it in check. But as soon as that establishes, that'll be a thick mat of ajuga. It just finished flowering as well. Flowers with those beautiful blue stem stalks, but even when it's out of flower, the color is really stunning. And a little bit of that burgundy in that foliage plays off of the Jap maple back here, harmonizing and tying this whole cool little corner in and making for a neat, you know, different, diverse little planting here. So this is a cool little space that's fresh planted and really interesting. And I love, you know, the story and how it kind of all ties together. And I thank you guys all that commented on helping to shape this and come up with a new little idea for this part of the garden. So anyway, I've got to get moving on, but it was good to see you guys here in this video, and thanks for joining us on another fun garden tour of Grandma's. We'll show you guys through what it looks like in the fall, but we're going to tour through a whole bunch of gardens and do a bunch more filming today, both for YouTube and our Instagram channel, so check those out, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.